Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. Hi, and welcome back to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide on your health awakening journey. Last week, we spoke all about the therapeutic order and the principles of naturopathic medicine. So I thought it might be fun for us to apply some of those this week to an example patient. Hopefully you can see yourself in some of these health concerns, and if not, you can still work through and apply some of the principles and strategies to your own health journey. Very often when patients come to me at midlife, they have chronic complex health concerns. They're multifaceted. We might be working on things like chronic fatigue, hormone imbalances, chronic digestive conditions. So it's very common for me to be untangling a web of symptoms and untangling a web of medical history. One of my favorite things to do when I first meet with a patient is ask them if they had a magic wand, what's the one thing that we would be addressing in that visit? I'm a big Harry Potter fan, and I find that it kind of breaks the ice a little bit, and they usually chuckle. But I explain to them that it's really important for me to know what to prioritize as I'm working through the therapeutic order and make sure that I'm addressing that right away. As we untangle this web, I hope that you can apply some of these principles and apply the therapeutic order on your journey. And please reach out as you listen along and let me know some of the concerns that you might have, and I'll be sure to incorporate them in a future episode. So let's get started, okay? Let's talk about the foundation of healing first. I love asking a patient what the one thing they really want me to prioritize is, but no matter what, I know that I'm going to focus on the nervous system at the beginning of a patient's protocol and getting to know them. So why is that? Well, the nervous system truly is the foundation of healing. When your body is stuck in a fight or flight state, healing is nearly impossible. So if you remember the therapeutic order, when we're establishing the foundations of healing, we're establishing the conditions of health, being in a healing state is part of that process. You see, your nervous system affects everything, ranging from digestion to hormone balance to lymphatic flow, your mental clarity, emotional regulation. The nervous system is key to a lot of the work that I do initially with patients. Because I'm promoting a healing state, a lot of the strategies that I'm incorporating in the beginning are revolving around that. When I'm linking nervous system to symptoms that are presenting at midlife, and so for this particular patient, there was a chronic immune system response that was occurring. It ended up presenting with some swollen lymph nodes, some fatigue, some bloating, and some other hormonal imbalance symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats. The first thing that I wanted to do with this complex symptom picture was assess what state the nervous system was in. Upon asking more about her history, I learned, okay, there was a lot of chronic stress. There was traumatic stressors and events in her history. And so it made sense that the nervous system was absolutely playing a role. And that in order to get her body into a healing state, that would be something that we would be working on. Even when we're addressing a symptom, we're always focused on building lasting resilience and looking to the future of putting the body into a healing state long term. So there's going to always be a balance of sympathetic and parasympathetic activation. Sympathetic is good, it's not bad, but we're also wanting to make sure that we get into the healing parasympathetic state. Now, why is that? This is, again, because we are establishing the conditions for health. At the base of that therapeutic order, removing obstacles to cure and establishing conditions of health. And when your body is in a healing state, so in that parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal state, you are providing the foundations or the conditions for health. So one of the first things that I do is assess with a new patient whether or not their body is getting into a healing state. Your nervous system affects everything from digestion to hormone balance to lymphatic drainage and immune health. And so if we're not getting into that healing state, that is always going to be a priority to me. So with this particular patient that we're using as an example, upon asking more about her history, I realized, okay, she had a lot of chronic stress. She had traumatic stressors. And so it made sense that she would be presenting with chronic swollen lymph nodes, chronic fatigue, bloating, other hormonal symptoms such as hot flashes, night sweats. The stress builds up in the system over time, and the system essentially is then going to say to you, hey, I'm overwhelmed. I'm going to exhibit a symptom because now things are breaking down a bit and I can't function as I normally was. This particular patient was definitely someone who was always caring for and providing for others. And now the body was essentially saying, hi, you need to pay a little bit more attention here. Something is going on. So first things first was, what state is her nervous system in typically? Are we getting into a healing state? Have we had chronic or traumatic stressors that have impacted our HPA axis, for example? And then essentially, what are we doing in the basic foundations of health or seeds of health categories every day to make sure that we stay in a regulated state and we provide the body with what it needs to heal? So even though I might ask a patient, if I had a magic wand, what would you like to work on? I know in the back of my mind that I'm also going to be asking a lot about their nervous system, their stress response, and their history of stress throughout life. The first pillar of health in my Vital Spirit method is the gut-brain axis. So essentially, if your body is stuck in a fight or flight state, or if you've chronically been in a fight or flight state, so that sympathetic nervous system activation, then healing is nearly impossible. So I am typically assessing in a first visit, are you able to get into a parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal state? Some signs that you are would be that it's easy for you to fall asleep, you have restful sleep, you're not experiencing high levels of anxiety throughout the day, you don't have digestive issues because of that gut-brain axis. Digestive issues tend to be one sign that there might be some nervous system dysregulation. So there's always some clues to me as to whether or not that person is in a regulated or healing state throughout the day. And essentially, if you're not getting into a healing state, healing is going to be more difficult. So remember the therapeutic order where we're establishing the healing conditions for health, right? The foundations of health. We need a regulated nervous system that gets into parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal so that we can heal. So at midlife, when a patient comes in with a complex chronic condition or complicated health history, maybe a tangle of symptoms that may or may not be related, part of the process is figuring out what state their nervous system is typically in. The nervous system is going to impact digestion, hormone balance, lymphatic flow, immune health, mental clarity, emotions. So I find it very important to assess right off the bat what state that patient is typically in. Example patient we're going to talk about today had a lot of chronic stress, had some traumatic stressors in her past. And in the beginning of assessing what was going on, I really felt like stress was going to play a big role in our conversation. So this particular patient had a chronic immune response, which was presenting as swollen lymph nodes, fatigue. There were some hormonal symptoms of hot flashes and night sweats, and there was some bloating. And so first things first, again, is establishing, is this person able to get into the healing state? And then I will always start to examine on the physical plane some root causes. So I ran some initial blood work, and in the follow-up visit, we went over that. I believe I also ran a stool test with her, and I don't think the results were back yet for our second visit. So I'm going to get further into how I assess the nervous system and what conditions for health that we need to be working on, or what seeds of health we need to water. So as I began working with this patient, if I'm looking at step one, removing obstacles to cure, One of the things that I identified was an obstacle to cure were some nutrient deficiencies. So she had low zinc and low omega-3s or essential fatty acids on her blood work. We talked about the chronic stress that was impacting the healing process, and I'll get into some of the things that I did for that in just a minute. She also had a reactivated Epstein-Barr virus, so I put that in the category of a high chronic viral load. We'll have some episode on that, I'm sure. And additionally, I was assessing the gut-brain axis or her gut-brain connection, right? And I typically do that with a stool test. We did not have those results in yet, but she was experiencing some bloating and had a history of some chronic GI issues. So I knew that the gut was playing a role in some of the things that we would be working on. Our focus in the beginning was really creating the conditions for health. So we did talk about sleep habits. We talked about hydration. We talked about clean anti-inflammatory eating. As I gather information on a patient, so essentially I'm getting to know them better, I'm running labs, I typically am guiding them on what I would label as a low inflammation or anti-inflammatory diet. If they don't know what that is when they first come to see me, there might be some foundational groundwork we're doing to work toward that. And some patients come in already eating that way. So we might be getting a little bit more advanced with diet or food as medicine in the beginning. Essentially, she was doing a great job in a lot of her seeds of health categories. And so I knew that there was likely something else that had not been uncovered that was essentially dinging her system, I like to say. And it was really my job, essentially, to figure out what that might be and to figure out how we could remove that obstacle to cure. As I was waiting on labs to potentially figure out what obstacle I had to remove or we had to work on helping her body remove, I did remind her to do things to support her lymphatic drainage. So remember, she had some swollen lymph nodes. So I talked to her about dry skin brushing, castor oil packs, Epsom salt baths. Anyone who's a patient of mine knows I always start patients with some knowledge around the lymphatic system, what it does for our body, and how we can support those detox pathways in ways that also actually feel really good and are relaxing. So that leads us to the next step, which was stimulating her body's self-healing mechanisms. So remember, I like to focus on getting the body into that healing state, so into that parasympathetic state. So she was someone who was familiar with some mindful practices, some breath work. And after we discussed and assessed her as a candidate for this, I spoke with her about something that I love to use for patients, which is called the Safe and Sound Protocol, which is essentially listening to filtered music that helps your body get into the healing parasympathetic state. We combine that with some EFT tapping and somatic breath work and really designed a protocol for her to regulate her nervous system based on some of the chronic and traumatic stressors that we had discussed in our time together. So when you're establishing a trusting therapeutic relationship and patients share that information with you, it allows you to really build in nervous system regulating tools and techniques that will not trigger them. You might need to titrate a bit, right? But will meet them where they are in that healing journey and what they are processing. So I might weave in a listening with a breath work, with an EFT tapping, and again, so much for me to talk with you guys about in the future. So if any of those things are new to you, I'll be sure to include some information in our show notes for you. As I knew I may need to move on to strengthening some weakened systems, I was also working in our second visit where we went over some of her labs. I was working on designing an energy medicine protocol for her. So I was using different homeopathic remedies. We had focused on some release of grief in some of her breathwork practices, and I selected a particular remedy for her that was indicated with some of that. And then we also did a brief craniosacral session where I actually had some hands on her and we worked through some of that grief process together. So that's a good example of stimulating the healing power of the body, right? Stimulating that vis. And I'll use energy remedies and things like that as I'm beginning to assess the body's ability to maybe take on a more aggressive therapeutic approach like antivirals or other immune supportive herbs or nutrients. So I did feel inclined to start with stimulating. I kind of explain it as stimulating from the inside out and working on some gentle drainage. And I often will say I'm working on the root ball of a chronic viral load as I'm getting the body prepared to release some of that in a more aggressive way, not dangerous, just a little more potent. So as we were doing this and starting to use some remedies, I was also addressing her gut-brain axis via some dietary modifications, some probiotics, and waiting for that gut microbiome assessment. Throughout that time period, she was also supplementing with omega-3s and some zinc, which again had shown up low in her blood work. So essentially we were giving her immune system the support that it needed, and at the same time, considering moving on to correcting any structural integrity issues. So remember, that's the next step in the therapeutic order. So as I explained, you're not necessarily going up and down or up or down stepwise. So you might be weaving in different layers throughout your visits or throughout your time together. So I would consider some of the correction of structural integrity, things like lymphatic drainage support, yoga. I didn't send her to or refer her to a chiropractor for an adjustment in particular, but some sort of visit like that would potentially be warranted to make sure that her nervous system wasn't being hindered by an issue there or any sort of structural musculoskeletal issue. So I would also tend to refer a patient like this out for acupuncture at times. I have lots of acupuncture friends that I love to send patients to, and I hope they will join me in an episode on the podcast as well. So this would be a good example of the first levels or layers of that therapeutic order and how we might work through them. Now, throughout that time, I think it's also important for you to know that she was engaging in daily practices. So when she was utilizing her safe and sound protocol and listening, she was also doing daily practices to support her lymphatic system, to support her detox pathways, to keep her body in that healing parasympathetic state. So I'm going to share some of those with you today so you can try some at home. Whether you're having any of these symptoms yourself or not, these are extremely wonderful tools. They're really simple and they don't cost you any money, and you can do them anywhere, essentially. So first is, let's talk about diaphragmatic breathing. We did in a previous episode do a very simple breathwork exercise. This is even simpler. So just practice 5 minutes of slow, deep breaths today where you're engaging your diaphragm. If you don't know what that means, to put it really simply, if you put one hand on your belly and one hand on your heart, and you feel where you breathe, if you're a diaphragmatic breather, you're breathing with your belly, so only that hand is rising. And if you're breathing from your chest or shallow breathing, the hand that's on your chest is going to be the one that's rising. Over time, you want to practice engaging your belly, blowing it up like a balloon, and then bringing it back in as you breathe. So you can find some videos on the internet that guide you in that if you're not well versed in it. But essentially, take 5 minutes every single day and practice some diaphragmatic breathing. Just slow down those exhales and engage your diaphragm. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It puts you into that rest and digest state. I had her doing this while she was listening to the Safe and Sound protocol, which is something that I love to do because it's like getting a double whammy of calming, relaxation, and healing state. And patients feel so good when they do it. Next is the dry skin brushing. So I can put some of my handouts on in the show notes. And you can also, again, Google dry skin brushing. Really any sort of lymphatic support. You can do the Big 6 lymphatic massage, self-massage. You can use castor oil packs. I'm sure we'll have an episode on those as well. Essentially, anything to support your lymphatic system is a great practice to have. And then next is legs up the wall pose. So this is one of my favorites. You don't have to do a whole yoga flow, but it is a nice one to do after a flow. Essentially, you're just going to lay down on the floor and put your legs up the wall and relax. I post videos on Instagram sometimes doing things like this because they are really powerful to activate that parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal nervous system. And they're really, really simple. And you can certainly just do them at home on your own. As you're doing one of these exercises and practicing one of these tools this week, I want you to just pause and take a moment to reframe any symptoms that you're experiencing right now that are maybe negative or unpleasant, right? We all have some things in our life going on where maybe some physical sensations or some mental, emotional struggles that are uncomfortable. And just reframe these symptoms for a minute as you're doing one of these relaxational and calming exercises, and start to think about them as messengers, as communication from our body, mind, or spirit that something needs attention. And by addressing that something that needs attention, we're going to feel better. So even though in the moment it might be uncomfortable, focus on not suppressing it and instead expressing it and listening to it and finding a way to figure out what the root of that might be. So one of the things that I love most about the therapeutic order, and as I'm walking you through this example, I hope you've been able to reflect on your healing journey and think to how the therapeutic order really does respect the body's natural ability to heal and the body's natural intelligence. So when you start with the least invasive methods like hydration, like food as medicine, like exercise and movement, like lymphatic support, legs up the wall, breathwork practices, something to regulate the nervous system, you really are creating a foundation for healing. You are establishing conditions for health. And remember, when we establish conditions for health, that's when disease cannot exist. And so as I'm doing some more maybe functional lab work or getting to know a patient better, I'm always working on watering those seeds of health, because then I know that we're establishing that healthy foundation. And as we work up or through and all around the therapeutic order, I can be confident that I've given that patient the conditions of health that the body needs to heal. I like to remind patients that as you're building those foundations of health and you're giving the body what it needs to heal, you're also providing the foundations for resilience so that as things come up in life, as life lifes you, whether it's a physical health concern or again, a major stressor in life, if you've worked on cultivating those foundations of health, you will be more resilient. You will have a larger threshold or window of tolerance to handle those events as they come your way. And so I really always do try to reframe some of the kind of more negative experiences that patients might have. And yes, I have them myself. I share what's appropriate in my life, and I will continue to do that with you guys as well. You have to have the darkness to have the light, right? All of my patients know I will talk about that. But if you can start to think about how and have some intentionality around your focus in your health journey and how these experiences, as you work through them, you really are creating a stronger foundation for health for the future. And again, as a physician that focuses on preventive medicine, I will always circle back and relate the tools and strategies we're utilizing in the moment to how that will create further optimal health and future wellness. I'm so glad you guys were here with me this week. Just remember this week that healing starts with the basics. Get your body into a healing state. This might look like getting your legs up the wall or just making sure that you're hydrated. Giving your body the tools it needs to heal means that it's less likely disease can occur. I can't wait to explore more with you. I'm thinking next week to talk about the gut hormone connection. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants here since I've never done a podcast before. So please subscribe, leave a review, and follow me at Dr. Kelly Livingston or at the Vital Spirit Method on Instagram. I'd love to hear what you are struggling with or what you might want to hear more about. I plan on inviting some colleagues as well. I've actually put my feelers out already. I'm hoping they can share their expertise in holistic medicine and maybe even some key insights from their own health journeys. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time.